Okay, I think we are live. It looks like it. So I want to say welcome to all of you, especially to Elizabeth and Nelson, who are the ones that you're going to be hearing from here. Welcome to this session on food sovereignty, movement building and local food systems. My name is Anja Lyngbaek. I'm from Local Futures. I'm here to introduce and to assist Nelson and Elizabeth. And I'm also here with Carly Gale, my colleague. And thank you to all of you that are going to be have tuned in, and to all of you that will be tuning in later to see the recording. Before I go any further of introducing Nelson and Elizabeth, I'll hand over the word to Carly, who will tell us a few things that we need to know about the tech side, I think.
Thanks, Anja. So again, I'm Carly. I work with Local Futures, and I'll be managing the Q&A in the chat box today. So just a few notes for our conversation. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A window, which you can find with the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And at the start of your question, if you can please list your name and where you're from. And then if you have comments to share with everybody, you can use the chat box. And in order for everyone to see your comments, please click the little blue icon at the bottom that says panelists and change that to panelists and attendees. And I think that's all for me. Enjoy the conversation. Back over to you, Anja.
Okay, so welcome. I'm going to start with you, Nelson, because I can't see Elizabeth right now. So Elizabeth has some internet issues, which I also sometimes have because we are all tuning in from the countryside. Nelson Mudzingwa is the national coordinator of Zimbabwe Smallholder Organic Forum, which I have read have an impressive 12,000 active members. Nelson is also a smallholder himself, as is Elizabeth, and they are both tireless food sovereignty activists that you'll hear from in a moment. And Elizabeth, I hope you're still with us. Elizabeth Mpofu is the general coordinator of La Via Campesina, which I hope many of you have heard of because it's the largest international peasant movement in the world, encompassing and pretty impressive 181, I think, organizations in over 80 countries, representing 200 million farmers. So Elizabeth is also a smallholder, and I think the founder of ZIMSOFF, and they are now going to be sharing about their vast experience in Zimbabwe and also internationally. And we're going to start with Nelson, who's going to give a bit of an introduction and background to the Shashe Agroecology School that both Nelson and Elizabeth have co-founded and are the leaders of. And this is a school, as you will hear, that having great success also in building movements, and of course in passing on the knowledge of sustainable agriculture. And then we'll hand the word over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk about the seed and food sovereignty movement, and about the key role of women as custodians of healthy food systems. Then we're going to shift into a sort of co-shared with Nelson and Elizabeth. They're going to talk about the movement building around the Shashe Agroecology School, both nationally and internationally. And for the last half hour, there'll be time for questions. So keep them coming, and Carly is going to keep track of them, and we'll get to those at the last half hour. So over to you, Nelson. I'll hand over the word on the screen to you because I understand you'll be sharing some slides, which is great. Nelson.
Okay,
so
thank you so much. Yes. Thank you so much. I can maybe share my screen.
You can indeed. Carly, can you facilitate the screen sharing?
I will have to share my screen.
Yeah, let's see. It was working before, should work now.
Yes, yes, it was working. Thank you so much for giving us this very important opportunity to present ourselves and to present our experiences in as far as localized food systems are concerned into our context and why we believe these are supposed to be issues that have to be rooted from your spirituality and cosmovision within your context, because each one of us is born in some area where there is a force that you cannot see and a force that you cannot interpret, and that force is very much connected to yourself, like a force that is connecting to a tree. If you look at a tree, it has got the deep roots that goes into the soil, and it has got a trunk, and it has got some branches, and it has leaves, and it has fruits. And that connection between what is under the soil and what is above the soil is what connects us to our spirituality and cosmovision. And it is the basis where we derive whatever we do in terms of action, because as human beings we have that responsibility always to act. But when we are acting, we must do our action with that consciousness of what hold us onto the earth, because the earth is what is quite powerful, and it is the force that we cannot command, but which we have to give a lot of respect and pay enough attention and contribute to its own functioning so that it can continue to survive as well, and even to support the future generations. I will give some talking on the Shashe Block of Farms experiences. The Shashe Block of Farms is an area that originally was made up of commercial white farmers who had owned land since colonization of Zimbabwe. But the coming of 2000 was a shift in terms of agrarian reform, in terms of land use, and in terms of occupation and who does what on which area, and the government of Zimbabwe declaring that land must be to the indigenous people, and then that was the birth of the Shashe Block of Farms in 2000. And this area is on the map. You can see that this is a part of if you check on, it's part of, this is Masvingo province, right? The rest of this is Masvingo province. And then on the north of Masvingo, just towards the border of Masvingo province, which is more like central, we have Ward 6 and Ward 33, which occupying the area of Shashe Block of Farms. And this is an area that receives an average rainfall of 400 millimeters of rain when the season is very good. And when the season is bad, it can receive less than even 100 or 100 plus, which is very much very, very small for the farmers to go into production. But in my discussion, you are going to see if connected ourselves to the area and how the area has accepted us and is actually supporting what we are doing in terms of production, and at the same time of what we are doing in terms of building our livelihoods. Yeah, in terms of the watershed, like I was explaining, you will realize that this area is, the name is actually derived from a river, which is not indicated on this map, because on this map you can see this is Tokwe river that is flowing from the north going down to Rinde, but the Shashe river flows into Muju Dam, which you cannot see. You are going to see it on my next slide, and which is just to the west of the block and the block of the farms, and within the block of farms. We have some tributaries, very small streams. That's Musomwe. These are our local names, and Shiny and Chwara. They flow into the Shashe River, and they are coming from the Shashe block of farms. And then this Shashe block of farms flows into Tokwe River, which is the river on the map that we see on the map, and which goes now into Runde and goes into the Sabe River down, and then into the ocean. Right, this is the Muju Dam I was talking about, and this is exactly where the Shashe blocks are, and the tributaries I was talking about are actually flowing into this river, the Shashe River, which comes all the way from the north and goes into Muju Dam. And this icon here is actually indicating where exactly I'm speaking from, where I am located. And in 2002, we had almost like 380 families who were officially resettled in the Shashe block of farms. And these are 6 farms that are occupying 15,020 hectares, which were formerly owned by just 3 white farmers. And we had a labor force which was quite limited, just 12 workers, and occupying all the 15,020 hectares. And now in 2002, we had more than 380 families coming on board, and each of the families is occupying 8 hectares of land. And on the 8 hectares, we have 2 important developments that are taking shape. We have the homestead that is within the 8 hectares. Then we have the arable land, where there's a lot of crop production that has to take place within those hectares and 8 hectares. And these families, ultimately, all of them, they are occupying 4,000 hectares of land, while 11,000 hectares were left out for grazing, because there's a dry land area. Much of it is all about cattle ranching, and that was the belief before. And how did we respond to that belief, and how did we come into it and change the mindset in as far as action is concerned, is what comes into my further slides. We came onto this piece of land with some ideas, where we had a lot of experience after having worked with a local NGO. As farmers, sometimes that you need to spare to work with local NGOs, to work with even government departments, and even to work with any other support organization that might be very much interested into supporting your ideology. So we had some experiences that we had got from a local NGO that was called the Association of Zimbabwe Traditional Environmental Conservationists. And when the whole concept behind with this organization was to promote what we call endogenous development, which is development that is based on the dynamics of the people, the knowledge of the people, and their wisdom as to how they have to move forward in their life, and how they have to pioneer their own journey without even taking much of foreign ideologies that have to come from the exogenous kind of mindsets, which in many cases you find they have that replacement of your ideas, and at the same time that replacement leading to your own selves, losing your own values, and even losing your own destination. But the learnings and the processes that we undertook with this local NGO led us into developing the whole ideology on the Shashe block of farms. And one of the key areas that we focused on was to revive our spirituality and cosmovision, and which was quite based on the 3 wells as indicated on the slide. And why we thought this is very, very crucial, we were going to come on a new land that was almost like virgin for the last 50 to 70 years under occupation by the white settlers, but then now coming in onto the indigenous people. So it was very key that we have to look back to our spirituality and cosmovision. First of foremost, just to thank the spiritual world for giving us back the land. You know, it's very important. It's a very crucial economic resource that every country on the world must consider when you want to talk about localization of food systems, that you must have somewhere where you need to produce your own crops and where you need to grow your own food, that you are not going to be determined how to produce it and how to manage it, and even how to process it in as far as even consumption is concerned. So we looked at the three worlds. You know, we looked at the natural world. The natural world is all about the flora and fauna. Anything that God has created, the spirit of the land has created, is very useful, and it has got enough. We need to give it enough respect that it deserves, like you giving the indigenous trees their values. You know, they have many uses, and most of it is the oxygen that we breathe that comes from the tree, which has to be local. You know, you don't need to get oxygen from elsewhere. If you suppose like this current trend of COVID, then you need oxygen to be able to breathe. But this time we're getting it from the indigenous trees that we have just kept on surviving because they are quite useful. And we have also a lot of indigenous animal species, in whether they are wild animals, they are livestock, and in their total numbers, in their diverse species, they are very useful. They are very much connected to you. Some messages can be transmitted onto the human being through the animals and through the plants, and plants can as well function as herbs that can heal your body and protect your body. Besides you moving a distance to get a medicine, you can simply get medicine where you are, as much as you understand your plants. Then we have the social world. The social world was describing us coming together. We did not come from a single district. We came from several districts as people were beginning to look for land to start their new life. They were coming from different districts and different totems and different backgrounds, and it was very, very crucial and important for these people to come together, to work together, and to understand each other and to become one people, and who believe that it is us who have to move this journey on this new land as a community. So we had that value that we had to put onto it. And then last was the spiritual world that we cannot see, which is much powerful of ourselves, and which has all the forces that we usually sometimes are very afraid of. If cases like when we have very heavy floods, you know, that's a very heavy spiritual action that you cannot describe, which you cannot understand in mortal sense, because it is being driven by forces that where you have not been able to participate in as far as the discussion to make that decision to affect you is concerned. So the three worlds is the philosophy that we brought on board, is quite useful for us to guide us and to lead us into our actions. And we also focused on to work towards what we understood as total agrarian reform. You know, where land is being taken over by indigenous people, there is that danger and dilemma to get the production levels being very much foreign, where there's a lot of influence of what is foreign, and that is what you don't understand. That is what is being promoted, which could be promoted by the agribusinesses, or it could be promoted by corporates, but occupying your space in terms of how you have to grow your own food and how you have to manage your own land and how you have to keep your land clean out of any influence of before. And so we believed in total agrarian reform as a step for us to produce and to live and improve livelihoods from the Shashe block of farms. We focused on issues that we thought could be very, very important that we focus as a community as we began to make life in the Shashe block of farms. And one of the most important was the maintaining fertility of the virgin soils. You know, like I've indicated before, that this was a vision for the last 60 years. So how would we maintain their fertility? And, you know, one of the most important issue that came into us was that we would need to make sure that the soils are fed, they are given food. For us to survive as human beings, we always eat every day, and we are eating 3 times a day. And it is very important also that you have to consider the soil to eat as well, for it to be able to sustain its own life, and also consider it to play a very fundamental role that it does in terms of our food production is concerned. So we had to find ways where we have to make a lot of food for the soil. This could be from our crop manure as indicated on the photo, and this could be from our compost that we could make, and it could be from the humus that we could collect from the forests, and all that being food that we thought could be useful and help build soil fertility for the soil to continue to survive, and with very clear and important respect to the future generations, that they will have to come onto this soil and to have to survive onto it as a virgin soil. We also looked onto the matter of reviving our local seed systems and food systems. World over, there is this discussion on food politics: who is feeding who, and who is controlling what we are eating, and why is that control? It is all about the marketing of food, and because food production is one of the most important enterprise any single person might think of, because everyone on the world, the billions that we are, it's at least once or twice a day, and which gives the food production a very huge market that has to be exploited by those who have converted food to become a commodity, by those who have converted seed to become a commodity as well. But as farmers, we thought, no, we have to go into what belongs to us, as our country is coming into a very difficult situation, like you have always read, even through the media, even through whatever form of information that many of us could have read, that Zimbabwe is suffering a very hyperinflation, and how can Zimbabweans then survive? One of the most important areas that we considered was that we have to have our own seed and food systems in place that we need to control, that we need to make sure how we are going to produce, and that we need to know how we are going to manage, and that we need to know what could be the benefits out after production. We also went on to managing the water cycle. The water cycle being in an area where you find we don't have enough water resources, we needed to make sure that we at least manage the water cycle. We at least manage the single drops that we receive every season, so much that we make use of it onto our crop production, and make sure that at least we get enough out of the yield. So one of the most important action that we had to take through was water harvesting, where we had to create a home for water to stay with us. You know, water always flows. If you don't open up where it is supposed to stay, it will just flow through your home and then it goes to the ocean. But here we had to create some places where water can be collected, and then it goes into the soil. Once it goes into the soil, it becomes part of the soil. It becomes the blood of the soil, because without the water in the soil, there's no life. The necessary conditions for any germination is moisture, warmth, and air. which have to be always available for any plant to germinate. So water is a fundamental resource that has to be contained, and that has to be still within ourselves. We had to make sure that we had to make a lot of effort to put it into the soil and to recharge our underground water supplies, which are in a very, very dry region. And the other issue that we considered was to cutting down of indigenous trees. We came in an area that had so much diverse species, be it fruit trees, indigenous fruit trees, be it timber, be it herbal plants, and so on. It was very, very crucial and important that all these indigenous species are quite conserved and protected, yeah, and kept so much that they can survive and help their function. Like I've indicated before, that the oxygen that we are breathing is locally produced by the air that is being manufactured by the trees, the indigenous tree species that we are surviving within. We also had to then come in to introduce even exotic trees, so as to make sure that we have that diversity of exotic and indigenous fruit trees, as well as other indigenous herbal and medicinal plants that have a function to the management of the ecosystem. Apart from that aspect, we also looked at increasing diversity of both small and large livestock. You know, initially I indicated before that the former were quite very much focused on cattle ranching. But it is not only cattle that we are supposed to keep. And our belief and our indigenous knowledge tells us that we need to keep as much diverse livestock species as possible. Like in our case, we introduced poultry, species, chickens, turkeys, skinfowl, duckies, pigeons, rabbits, pigs, goats, sheep, donkeys, and many other livestock species that we thought could be very useful for purposes of creating the value of our connection to the three worlds, because there are some specific livestock species that have an important role they function in as far as maintenance of that three worlds is concerned. And there are some small livestock and large livestock that have a function in as far as creating income is concerned. And there are some of those species that also play a fundamental role in as far as contributing to protein in my household is concerned, whereby I don't need to pay any dollar, but I need just to slaughter from my own backyard. We also thought about use this livestock species to create a permanent source of the feed for the soil, and then integrate this system so much that I don't need to pay again a dollar for me to buy fertilizers, but I would simply use crow manure to feed the soil. I don't need to pay a dollar to buy a herbicide. I will use maybe cattle urine and mix it with other ingredients to spray aphids in the garden, and these functions being identified by the local farmers and getting all the necessary training at local level, where there was that interaction of the farmers' knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and making it enriched to support the development process of the farmers. We also thought about developing our family farms to become learning centers. You know, it's very, very crucial that you start to look at it from a very local level, whereby each and every farmer or any activist who could be very much interested into the subject area that we're talking about, where, for instance, localization of food systems is an issue here, that they will need to develop infrastructures that have to be seen by the people, that they then indicate the walking, the talking, other than theorizing of the discussion, but we have to come down to the earth and be examples of that change that we're looking at, and look it in a more detailed and in-depth way, where we have to put it into practice and others begin to learn from whatever you are doing. So that's one of our centers of excellence, where you find many farmers coming, and even government officers coming, and even policymakers coming now to begin to learn from examples of success and practices of success where useful knowledge is being transferred. And so this is just the whole background onto how we have come onto being an example of farmers. We have thought about an idea that would lead into localization of food systems, thinking it from a whole perspective of how they're connected to Mother Earth and what binds them to Mother Earth, and what actions would that have to bring on board to make sure that at least their connection to Mother Earth then bring results that feed their families, and that feeds their communities, and that feeds the nation, and at the same time create their economies to become vibrant and make them earn some little benefits out of their sweat. So this is the background. I will leave it over to Mother Elizabeth to take it through. Over to you, Mother.
Thank you, Anja, for giving me this opportunity. Unfortunately, my network today is down, it's so bad, and I don't know if I am going to manage. But taking from where Nelson have left, maybe just sharing the experience.
Yeah, Elizabeth, we'll just continue with you on audio if your internet is strong enough. It sounds like it might not be. Elizabeth, are you with us? Hello, Elizabeth.
Maybe Nelson, can you go ahead, Nelson, because my network is poor. It's just bad because it's windy and the internet is not really stable. Nelson, can you go ahead, please?
Okay.
But right now we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Because you cannot record pieces, that is what I wanted to avoid. Maybe what I was saying is the experience of women, yes, especially the rural women who are much involved in the work at Shashe Agroecology School. We know very well that the majority of women are the food producers across the globe, especially in Africa, where we know about 70% of food producers are women. But for ages, the women have not been supported or recognized of their role. So as women here, we are trying at all our level best to mobilize each other, to sensitize ourselves, and make sure we know our rights as women. We know our right, the correct place where we should really be respected and also supported. If we look at the production side itself, it is a woman who is always on the farm. But at the end, when it comes to sell the produce, the man jumps in. So this is all our work which we are trying to see how best the women can be given the opportunity to control, to have a say from the family level, international level. I've been working with the rural women across the globe as the general coordinator of La Via Campesina. And in La Via Campesina, we have what we call women articulation, where we are also working together, coming together, voicing our rights, our needs, our demands in this articulation. coming to Shashe Agroecology School, I was listening to Nelson when he was talking about some of the activities which are going on at the Shashe Agroecology School. When we talk of seed fairs, this is the role of women which gather together to bring our seeds. Then it's a matter of competition to see exactly who planted the most crops. And from there, we have our seed custodians who also now assist us to select the best seeds, which we want to keep so that we don't lose the seeds, our indigenous seeds as before. It's a role of our women. These are happening especially at Shashe Agroecology School and in other countries who have managed to come to visit Shashe Agroecology School. They've learned quite a lot from our sides, and they are also replicating the same system. Regarding the learning and exchange visits, it has also opened up the minds of rural women. I remember some women who came from Mozambique, women who came from Tanzania, some who came from Uganda. They had no idea of how women can also be leaders, because from their organizations, all the leading roles were being men. So after they came here, they found out no, the structure at the Shashe Agroecology School, it's a unique one where the leaders are women and the men are there to support. And when we come to our traditional ceremonies, we have our elderly women who are taking the role of preparing all the ceremonies, and the men are there to come when everything has already been done. Because here, as he was talking about the spiritual world, we believe, and this has been the belief for ages and ages with our ancestors, that before you even go to farm, you have to prepare a ceremony. This is the rain-making ceremony. Then after harvesting, the Thanksgiving ceremony. And there are so many ceremonies which we prepare here at the Shashe Agroecology School. And the other role which the women are playing at large is the youth empowerment. We know there are young girls who have left school, who are now pregnant, and some are married at a very young, tender age. And it is a role of us women to make sure these young women are nurtured to the extent of understanding who they are and to accept the situation and not to get stressed, but also to be actively participating in all the activities which we believe that we can sustain our livelihoods as women. Yeah, in brief, I think it is very important to note that nowadays we are witnessing a very big change with all our actions which have been going on across the globe, in Africa, here in Zimbabwe, and other neighboring countries. Women are now being recognized. And even at the party politics, there are also women who are now leading. So to me, I can say we have managed, although it is not 100%, but we are foreseeing a situation whereby women are now being recognized and also being supported in all the work which we are doing. I will end up my brief explanation regarding the role of women. And Nelson, maybe you can just finalize the movement building as is indicated in our program. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mother, and for that detailed explanation on the role women usually, and which is much of it is just inborn, and it is what that role that was created naturally by the spiritual world for purposes of coexistence within families, and which then, if you look at it in more detail, you find somewhere there were a lot of interferences that actually led to some effect, like the case that we sing and that she has alluded to is on the role of women as the seed custodians. I cannot be as perfect as any woman can do in as far as seed selection is concerned, and men are not that patient anyway, and I will say that on behalf of other men. Maybe if others who are here, men, can maybe comment on it, but according to my own experience, it is that factor which makes women so explicit in as far as seed selection is concerned, and in as far as guardianship of seed is concerned, and as far as guardianship of household nutrition is concerned, because whatever the family is not myself, it's not my role who has to think of what to cook on the day, but it is the role of my wife to understand. But my role is then now to provide as much as possible so that she has a much wider choice on what exactly to select, which maybe the family by that day is in favor of, and which then spread as much as it goes into other families, because the visits that you might experience at your household then indicate what you are eating, as others learn from the menu that every day is actually prepared. Which is a very important role that women play in as far as the building up of the Shashe Agroecology School is concerned. And also coming into this discussion where we going into movement building, how do you then grow from where you are as family farmers? And if you look back, we have the United Nations decade for family farming, right, which is coming through in all countries that have become signatories to it, and those countries that still are yet to sign and to work onto it, and which as farmers we have learned that we have to grow from the family farms and then become a nation that is family farmers that and who have not to be facing globally of COVID-19, where there are restrictions for one to move from one place to another. And when your food is coming from elsewhere, you have a problem that you cannot access that food. But when your food is within your household, it is very, very easy for you to even take whatever you want to eat. Like here, in the families within the Shashe block of farms, you find you can simply slaughter a goat, you can simply slaughter a cow, you can simply slaughter a chicken, you can simply just take a bucket of meal and go to your neighbor who has a grand meal, and then you mill it, and then you can start to consume, which is just a clear practice that many families worldwide will have to learn through. So how did we move it through? We had to start to develop what we call centers of excellence. The centers of excellence are then the family farms, whereby we have to set up in practice practical demonstrations that have to indicate some form of training tools that will help others to learn from your practical examples, and that will have to test the quality of food that you are eating, because you are producing, you have some experiences, you will have to explain to others to learn through that center of excellence. And how is your homestead going to appear? It will have to indicate structures that have that space and accommodation of other family farmers who might visit you. And it will have to have some space again for setting up demonstration models that will have others to begin to learn from practical examples. You don't need to learn thinking about food. When we're talking about localization of food, we don't need any theories. People don't eat words, they eat food. So they will need to come back to the practice of it, and then they will need to see and analyze a real examples on the ground. And workshops about farmers are not supposed to be in the urban centers whereby there's this showcase of pictures, but they have to be in practice and they have to be on the family farm. So the Center of Excellence is therefore the place to welcome the matter of how is the information transferred from one farmer who has gathered a lot of experience to a farmer who is beginning to learn. We've created a platform where we talk about farmer-to-farmer extension and training. Right? Farmer-to-farmer extension and training is a bridging gap, like the case of Zimbabwe. As we went through the hyperinflation, the bad economy, we had that huge gap of extension, whereby farmers could not be reached out by government extension. They had to now to start other new methods that they have to improve in terms of knowledge, in terms of practice, in terms of information that would help them into meaningful production. And so the farmer-to-farmer kind of extension was the opportune time to get us through. So this exercise then attached to the centers of excellence helped us very much to develop the scaling out of our work in as far as localization of food systems is concerned, whereby we had now to organize trainings for farmers coming to stay with farmers. Be it that you are a technocrat, you know much, but you are a farmer within Shashe Agroecology School. Be it that you are a traditional doctor, you know much, but you are the farmer in the Shashe Agroecology School, and many others, many other examples, setting up these centers of excellence and then accommodating farmers, those that were coming from other places to learn. Through that process, we've had lots of different farmers visiting us on a daily basis. It's almost like an average of 10 farmers visiting each center of excellence for many reasons. Others coming to learn, others coming to buy, others coming to eat, others coming to many different kind of reasons for visiting. And that has become a process that is spreading the information within the local level. Then we spreading it outside the Shashe block of farms. We organized, again, training opportunities for farmers that were coming from smallholder farmers organizations, because within Zimbabwe Smallholder Organic Farmers Forum, we are organized from the local level. We are organized from the farmer level, whereby a farmer is part of a smaller group that is within his or a village. Then that group connects to what we call a smallholder farmers organization, which is to occupy maybe 1 or 2 wards, and that smallholder farmer organization then connects to what we call a cluster, which then reaches a province or 2 provinces or 3 provinces, depending on the location of that specific kind of a cluster. And how did we want then now to have this information spread into the clusters? So the farmer-to-farmer training via the smallholder farmers organization representatives was one of the key areas that we had to focus on, where we had lots of visitors coming now to learn and getting lots of hands-on information. Some of them learning by practice. They have to come into my garden and then they have to do the practice. They learn about how to make manure. They learn about how to keep seed. They learn about how to keep fish. They learn about how to keep chickens. They learn about how to harvest water, and then they have to go back to their piece of land and practice the same exercise. And they are learning from a practical farmer who is on the ground, who has some examples, who has some experiences, and that farmer then are supporting them to be able to then transfer that information through practice, not just through by mouth, but through your practice. As you get back to your home, you need not go to talk about the experiences through your mouth, but the people that live with you within your environment must see your actions. And this has helped us to spread the information to the different smallholder farmer organizations. And then we had some local NGOs, some of them very grassroots NGOs, those that are like-minded, those that feel the issue is a very noble area that we have to go into, like the case of the whole food systems issue, as we look forward to the September World the Food System Summit. We need to take into account what the local farmers are doing and learn from the local farmers. What are their experiences and how do they want to look at it? They need not to look at it from a global perspective, whereby the corporates have got their own definition, but we have to look at it from the local level and see what the farmers are eating and what the local consumers are preferring as their food that they eat. So we had to bring on board these like-minded organizations that they also will bring that expertise in terms of capacity building, training our farmer leaders, so that we're facilitating workshops and at the same time reinforcing the information that the farmers could have transferred to others, and making sure that it is implemented where resources are needed, making sure that it is supported. Could it be there is a gap of water? How do we bring water closer to these farmers, and how do we bring seed closer to these farmers, and how do we bring this kind of knowledge to this farmer, and how do we document farmers' experiences, and as much as even getting closer to even transferring it into a local language to make sure that at least all the farmers then understand. And then that collective work between allies and farmers had then to connect itself to policymakers, because the whole discourse here, we are talking about policy, where we have to need guidance on how we have to move forward, and how could we then think beyond whatever we are practicing, but then have that support from a policy dimension to indicate that the local seeds are of value, or agroecology is of value, and growing it into is a national kind of a policy framework. And so that's that process we had to go through it at national level. And maybe with connectivity of Mother, I will, and with our time, I'm checking on my time. Here we have almost like 6 minutes to go, and I will just maybe sum up, Mother, that we become part of the global peace and movement, that Mother Elizabeth is the general coordinator, that is Labia Campesina, for reasons that we needed all that solidarity and confidence to be part of the global community in as far as the struggles that we are talking about are concerned, because these are huge issues which are at levels sometimes politicized. Yeah, like for example, we talk about the food politics, who is controlling what we are eating, and how is that food being produced, and what are the driving forces of what I end up eating every day in my kitchen, and where is it that I have to buy that kind of a food. So the Labia Campesina movement was one of those powerful peasant movement globally that we thought could help us to spread the knowledge that we had gathered at local level, so much that it actually reaches other continents and influence the decisions of the farmers in Zimbabwe. And our experiences is that we have moved through this in forms of being members of collectives within Via Campesina. Like for instance, when you talk about the collective on peas and rice, what are the issues that we need to bring on to as far as the peas and rice are concerned, and what is it that we have to bring on board to influence decisions even at national level or at regional level, and in as far as peas and rice are concerned, and what are the issues that in as far as public policies are concerned, that we need to come on as farmers and bring the voice of the farmer at that level, because in the previous, you find there was a lot of farmer, I don't know whether that is correct English to say, farmer negligence, or it indicates that the farmer was being neglected. Because that's what I want to indicate here, that the farmer was being neglected at all the fronts, that the farmer is not knowledgeable, the farmer doesn't know, the farmer has no information, the farmer doesn't do anything that is meaningful, but only the technocrat. But yet the farmer is the person who has the land. The farmer is the person who has all of it, who has the experience. And how do we bring on board that experience to policy level? And there were issues again on climate change. We have suffered Cyclone Idai in our region, and we have suffered many floods, we have suffered droughts. And what are the solutions as farmers that we have come on board with, and how do we then bring that at international level? So the participation of our members from ZIMSOFF, having gone through all the trainings through the centers of excellence, has necessitated us to be able to play a very, very fundamental role in that collective space. And would it be agroecology and seed systems, and getting on board the experiences of the women who are seed custodians? What experiences do they have, and what knowledge can they contribute into a collective space that is reaching out to global level, and what influence can we bring on board that has to make that collective agenda? And that is almost like necessitated us to spread all our information, apart from the work that we have a lot documented. We have done a lot of documentation with GEAR Foundation. We've done a lot of documentation through via Campesina. We've done a lot of documentation from through other organizations and media platforms that indicate our work and how that is spread to all over the world. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Nelson and Elizabeth. Don't go away, please. If you, Nelson, do come back on the screen.
Yes, we are here.
If you can. And Elizabeth, of course, that same goes for you, but we know your internet is not particularly good. So we're going to start with some questions here now, although I think you've already answered some of them that came in, one of them that came in, Nelson. So we have another one here from Shweta, and who asks, do you see this transformation picking up vis-a-vis sort of existing ways, and how far has it spread? And I think here Shweta is probably referring to ZIMSOFF and the agroecology school, Shashe Agroecology School. I mean, how are you able, have you been able to kind of influence others? I here refer to them as conventional farmers, but you know, and is it spreading the kind of food sovereignty and agroecology movement? I don't know, Nelson, are you there, or Elizabeth, if one of you perhaps could speak to this?
Yeah, just to answer the question, I can try to answer the question. If we look at how the debates are being undertaken, especially.
Yeah. I think we lost your voice there. Hello, hello.
Yes, I can come in.
Please.
Yes.
Good, the two of you here.
I want to pick it up from where Mother was explaining that how is it spreading? Yeah, I think I've touched part of this, that initially it's spreading from both ways. Yeah, spreading from both ways. I mean, there were already examples that were on the ground that people already were doing right? And these were almost like going hiding now, because there's this rhetoric kind of extension that talks about it being backward, you know, and then whatever you could be doing then could make you not to feel that this is a good practice. Then there is this message that is coming that this is the modern day speech, and this is the modern day action that brings diversity. And then there is also the issue of health, yeah, where there is a lot of illnesses. You know, people are suffering diabetes, people are suffering high blood pressure, and many other chronic illnesses that are coming in. Those are driving forces. Then there is also a driving force that is coming through the issue of climate change, yeah, where you find there is a drought and people don't harvest anything, and where there is that farmer who is harvesting water, harvesting very good yields, and the driving forces led to, in fact, they became our riding horses for us to achieve the spread of our practices, because nature was behind us and nature was helping us and influencing whatever decision that you want to do to make it wrong and help us move this debate and make many people understand that it is important to go harvesting water to feed the soil, to keep your own local seeds, because they are adaptable. Your local seeds are adaptable to your own local conditions, and your local seeds are available. They are easily accessible within your neighbors, and if you use those, then you can be able to produce food. You cannot grow any seed that is foreign, which you don't know how much it behaves and how much it knows how you also behave, because even if you are lazy, you grow a hybrid that needs hard working. What is going to be your result by end of it? And that means there are this one. So the spread naturally was going through that, and the trainings that we organized, the exchanges also that we organized, were there mainly as reinforcements to the already trained people who were trained on job by nature and by other catastrophes that they could not manage. So they ended up getting good answers and making the message spread faster.
And maybe, Nelson, just to add on, right now, the position here in Zimbabwe, where already the government with civil society organizations, which we are part of, are already starting to develop the agroecology policy, although it is still under development, but we are hoping that at the end, we are going to have a policy which really promotes and protect agroecology farming practices.
Sounds very promising, Elizabeth. You clearly, you know, further ahead than many others are. I have another question here from Abba in India, and who asks, at what level do farmers need to interact with the government? Are there local government bodies they need to engage with or rely on? And does it get political? I think here, like party political. And there was always someone else asking whether, you know, whether you can get support from the Ministry of Agriculture for ecological initiatives. But let's address the one from Abba first. Do farmers need to interact with the government?
Yes, farmers, it almost should work with their governments.
Please, we can't see you, Nelson, if you can come up again, particularly with your lovely background and the chickens.
All right. Farmers should work with their governments, yeah, and because they are occupying territories where that government is actually controlling, and even if the ideas are different, but you cannot dialogue unless you come together and be on the same table. and then you are able to discuss and dialogue and even influence, because the more you talk together, the more you understand, and the more you show what you are doing to the government, is the more they begin to understand your senses. And this has been one of our approaches, where when we organize what my mother has alluded before, that we organize best farmer field days. On the best farmer field days, we're inviting many different stakeholders, many of them coming from the government, such that they begin to learn from our practical examples. And we have made strides in as far as the inclusion of the small grains into the national granary is concerned, by our matter of our participation and hosting government officers where small grains thrive and where small grains produce large yields. And that has been one of the strategies that we have used when we also organize seed and food fairs. We bring on board government officers, we bring on board policymakers at local level. So the engagement with government, it is at from local to national level, so much that they begin to learn on what exactly we are doing and who we are. There's this whole discussion about politics, and what I've learned from many people is that they don't know what is politics. They think politics is all about governance, but that's just a level of politics. To me, politics is simple. It is just the art to convince, and everyone is a politician, because somewhere you've tried to convince, you are politicizing. So this is just that discussion, which when you are ever doing any activity in your own area, you are doing a lot of politics. So when you are dealing with politicians, you have to understand what level of politics that you are discussing. When it is about food politics, how much is that politician knowledgeable on the food politics, and what are the gaps that politician will need to understand. So it will not go into governance politics, because it is not about governance. It is about what we are eating, and which has to be a concern of everyone, a citizen. We as a consumer, we has to understand whatever is eating, and then it becomes part of that movement to grow, to how to grow it, because it is what matters most, not just governance. You cannot govern when you are hungry. You need to govern when your stomach is full. And how do you react to it?
Well, I mean, here a comment from myself, like I recognize what you are saying there, particularly when you talk about politicians on a local level that are often much more engaged and interested and easier to convince, or that are more eager to learn, because they are part of, in some way, of the communities and have a particular interest. But it becomes much more difficult on a national level, which I'm not certain if that's also the case. And in Zimbabwe, what I'm thinking here was that I don't know what the situation is in Zimbabwe in terms of so-called free trade agreements that often come in and supersede national laws, and in a way hinder national governments and local governments in doing what is best for food sovereignty, for farmers, for healthy food systems. I don't know if you could say a little bit about that, or Elizabeth, about that situation, if you are facing those kinds of problems in Zimbabwe, and if you as ZIMSOFF and of course also as Via Campesina, I know they are very vocal on the problems with corporatization and so-called free trade.
Unfortunately, yes. I didn't get the whole question. Maybe Nelson, can you answer that?
Yes. You would find that every nation, be it maybe at regional block and be it at continental level, we have lots of these agreements that are coming. The free trade agreements are a very important area that is coming onto how we have to even produce our own food. Like, for example, our country right now, we have a new development on the growing adoption of use of 91, where because of trade, because of horticulture products, it is coming now to even say, like, can we change the whole seed act to reflect UPOP 91, yeah, and for us to be able to qualify to this. And I would not say this very much as some kind of a position within a government, but I would call this a position within a leader in a government that might be in favor of a certain specific position versus the national constitution in as far as protection of the rights of the citizens is concerned, and which sometimes then you find many countries have gone on to this kind of free trade agreements without a very detailed assessment on the constitution of their nations, where in as far as protection of the rights of citizens is concerned, and they've made certain abrupt decisions that have become instruments that affect the systems. But and in as far as us as farmers are concerned, our weapon has been action, where we talk about advocacy. We have had some experiences where we have believed that it is not that we simply have to talk, but we have to produce evidence. Once you produce evidence, it is very easy to even dialogue, because the evidence is when we talk about trade agreements, what are the products that we can offer, and whether is the market, and how are we infringed by international market, and what are the blocks that are coming from the international market that can affect our market space and as farmers, and how do we change that mindset to think globally but to think locally? Yeah, when you think locally, you begin to look at your local market. And in Zimbabwe, we have an opportunity where we are looking at what we call devolution, which is more like decentralization of powers from national to local level, and the local level now then beginning to think on how they have to maneuver to make their own local economies to become vibrant. And one of those is the area of food systems. How are you coming in your food systems and make it more vibrant, that it becomes an instrument that supports your own situation? So it is a case that we follow with very much interest as free trade agreements are negotiated at national level, at regional level. Our influence has been that we have to produce evidence that have to convince policymakers to be able to switch on to what is local and see the value of protecting what is international and what is local, particularly with politicians when they want votes. It's something.
Elizabeth, do you want to say something? Do you want to add something? Okay, Elizabeth, internet keeps disappearing, I think. So we have also, I think, another question here from Shweta. And I think it's because you weren't here at the beginning, but Shweta asked, the nature is inspiring you to practice into innovations in your daily lives. How did you get started? Nelson, you were addressing this at the beginning, but I don't know if you can say like a few words about this. Maybe not so much about the Shashe Agroecology School, but what, for example, inspired you to get started and Elizabeth to get started on this?
Okay. In nature, there's one thing that is very sacred that we never thought about, and I don't know if from the listeners, if they knew that there's only one shape that the spiritual world is actually created, and that is the round shape. Many of these shapes were created by men, but the earth is round, the moon is round, the trees are round, our bodies are round. We don't have corners on our bodies. So that means that sacredness of nature is what has commanded us, that we have to be part of a system that has its own dimension in terms of the creation of nature. And by wisdom, we have become part of civil society organizations that really were promoting the value of nature, or that we're promoting the value of culture and cosmovision, and that we're promoting, we call it in our region, umuntu, meaning myself, meaning my link to the spiritual world, my blood, my connection to nature, and which binds me to be a living human being, and that connects me even to what I eat, because my food is not just food. I'm not a car which can just take petrol and it goes, but I'm a human being. When I eat food, it is doing lots of different other functions apart from just filling my stomach. And therefore, that connectivity was brought about by matters of the richness of knowledge that we got even from our grandparents. As indigenous people to Zimbabwe, we were learning from our parents. We were learning from families that were cultured, that had that background and rooted into their local spiritual and cosmovision, and who then that spirit then led us into that connectivity to the different kind of organizations that we have worked with in the past, and building us then to have this transformation process. Where we are right now is a transformation process, whereby we have left the rhetoric on its own, and then we have begin to walk the talk, to become part of the farmers and to live amongst the farmers and sleep like the farmers do and eat like the farmers do. And then you can see the mistakes as you then behave like what they are doing every day. Then you can begin to learn the experiences. So with all that background, we've become part of this movement.
Thank you, Nelson. You are now, Elizabeth has just said that she's disconnecting, probably because her internet is not good. But I still see you here, Elizabeth. So if it's come back, just jump in whenever you like. There's another question here, Nelson, or Elizabeth, if you can hear us and can speak, from Simran Chopra, who asked that I would like to ask the panelists how the country's land reforms that you were speaking about earlier, Nelson, affect small-scale farmers, and how the farmers contribute to the conversations of the decolonization of land and food systems and the imagination of people. I think you've both spoken about a number of those things, but maybe you could say a little bit at least about the land reform, and maybe you have more to say about the other points as well.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. And this is almost like a day's discussion. It's very long, but I will try to summarize. I will try to summarize. Yeah, it was not by anyone that it comes back all the way from the liberation struggle. The liberation struggle of Zimbabwe was not about anything else apart from decolonizing the ownership of the resources and decolonizing the cultures, who is to be a culture that has to drive the agenda of a country, and who has to own resources that have to drive the economy of a country. And then this was the purposes of the Zimbabwe struggle towards independence. Then after independence, then there were questions led by those who were driving the spirit, the struggle, and those who were driving the struggle were spirit mediums. When we are talking about spirit mediums, we are talking of mortal beings who are possessed by the spirit of the past, to be able to question and to direct and even to quiz what are the issues that have not yet been fulfilled. So the same spirit mediums after independence, they came back again and to ask these important and noble questions: that are we independent or not? And the question was not, we were not owning our land. The land was still in the hands of the few minority who were not indigenous people. And so why did we go to the struggle? And why did we shed blood into the struggle? And what can we do for us to get back to our motherland and own these resources? And there was a direction that was narrated by the spiritual world on how we can achieve it, and the strategies were also narrated how we can achieve this. And that process is that what led to massive occupation of land, guided by the spiritual world and protected by the spiritual world. It was not by the government. The government had to comply to what the farmers and the peasants out there had already carried over onto their own spaces, because like myself, I was never instructed by anyone to occupy this piece of land where I'm speaking from, but I just had the energy to say I need a piece of land. Then I had to move with my wife and with our little bags to come and occupy this place where we have established a very successful center of excellence in the Shashe Agroecology School, which you have seen one of those pictures with so many people seated around it. It was out of Paul and Dagger. One of the reasons that we wanted to get land back, and worldwide, this is still a very thorny issue where we talk about land grabbing as an issue, and which is many countries have never achieved, and where a lot of corporate companies that are producing, that would want to produce fuel, that would want to produce stock feed, that would want to produce many other products that people don't consume, right? If are occupying very big pieces of land, and our governments going along with such companies. Our government was never along that direction. It was there then to protect the peasants, and they needed to comply to the needs of the farmers that had occupied land. And then we had laws that protected us to become part of the new land reform process in Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Nelson. And this was precisely something you and I were talking on not so long ago, where I also asked about the land grabbing that's happening in so many countries, from Eastern Europe to Eastern Africa. And it was with great surprise that I learned from you that your government had been standing strong, and that the land reform has been helping you to avoid this problem of corporate land grabbing. We have another question here. I'm not certain if I understand it correctly. It says, are producers able to exercise choice as what to offer and share? Shweta, maybe you can specify that a little bit more, that question. Meanwhile, I want to ask you, Nelson, are you able to engage young people? I mean, in so many places of the world, you have young people still being kind of pulled into the cities, urban life, and for a few decades, if not more, there's been a lot of pressure on young people, almost brainwashing into thinking that rural livelihoods are backwards, and so is that something you are facing too in Zimbabwe, or are young people seeing a future in the agroecology movement and as a smallholder with their own land?
Yes, there's this lot of this talk, in fact, even locally at national level, that the young people are not being involved in, but which I stand to stand up and correct. It's not that case. It starts from the matter that you find much of the work that we were doing here, like for example, we were talking about water harvesting, where you need deep contours, and you want to dig very deep. You want to dig into to produce, and much of that work is being done by young people. But when you want to talk about when you want to talk about agriculture. There is when you in fact generally when you want to organize a meeting, there is that tendency of the elders to say the meetings are for the elders, they are not for the young people, and the profits are for the elders, they are not for the young people. But then you want to zero onto a discussion when you want to come back to a household. How am I doing it myself at my own household? Setting up a household development committee is what helps quite a lot. Each household must have that development committee, which has to guide whatever you are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
If the father is there, is the chairperson. If the mother is there, she's the secretary, and she's both the secretary and treasurer. And then the little children are the committee members. And that family, every day you wake up, there is a plan of action that is supposed to be implemented. If there is a meeting within that household, there is supposed to be representation of all the members, so much that it is very clear and known that how much have we produced and how much is it going to, who is going to get how much, and how are we going to distribute the resources, even to improve the farm, to build whatever. And you find young people very, very active. And there is that disconnection that has come through between the parents and children. The parents have become so much occupied, maybe by work or maybe by other things, that they have left children to become part of the school, not of their families. And the school teachers who are completely not knowledgeable at all with your children are now nursing and building up your children on your behalf. That tendency has led us into this messy to where we talk about it now, that children are no longer active, or the youth are no longer active. But for as long as you build children from your own household, and that one does the same, and that one does the same, children are a very important force, because they are the energy of a family farm.
Exactly. And I think what you're describing right now is something that we're seeing all over the world, and particularly with the school system that is perpetuating a kind of a very urban future, and most often they're not preparing youth for jobs in the urban sector, and totally ignoring the importance of food and farming. So I think it's not probably just in the school. I don't know about in Zimbabwe, but certainly almost everywhere else in the world, you know, the access through mobile phones to this kind of global consumer culture is also driving and shaping the way people are thinking, no? Both youth and adults.
Yes.
Getting back to this question here from Shweta, that if people or producers in Zimbabwe are able to exercise choice about what they produce and so forth, that is in connection with free trade agreements. I guess maybe referring here to, for example, in many places, local producers are undercut by subsidized foods that are coming in from other countries as a result of these so-called free trade agreements. So do you have anything here now, Nelson? Is that the case in Zimbabwe? Is the kind of, are you being undercut as producers and stopping growing, for example, basic foods?
Yes, it goes on to the point that when the model of food production that you could have gone through into, like for example, we have local farmers here, some of them who could have gone into contract farming. When you go into contract farming, you have no choice. You are controlled by the contract. The contract dictates what you are going to produce, whether it's food that you want to eat with your family, whether it's not food that you are not going to eat. whether it's a cash crop or whatever, is controlled by the contract. Whether that contract is back to you, it doesn't matter. Then there's food production that I control as a farmer, which I'm producing from what I know, seed that I know, and on the land that the government is allocated to myself. It means I've got control, and our national laws protect my sovereignty as a person or as a family. We are protected to be able to go into that direction, because we could have that capacity to produce whatever we want. Subsidies from anyone is free of choice. I don't need to go into taking any subsidies, because if I have my own manure, if I've got my own seed, if the rains come, it means I'm going to produce, and then I'm not going to be controlled. But for as long as I'm under contract agriculture, or for as long as I'm under government input subsidy programs, and I have become a farmer who is dependent, then it is very difficult for me to be independent at all. I will continue to become dependent, because I have my blood is almost like absorbed it as taking it as normal when it is not normal. The choice is yours. There's nobody who is forced in Zimbabwe to go into any form of kind of an agriculture that has to control how much you want to do in as far as food production is concerned.
It seems to me that Zimbabwe as a country must have some much stronger laws on the protection of food sovereignty and farmers. I'm keen to look into that a bit more, because it seems like you might have some legislation and with the land reform that, you know, could be really good examples, you know, of progressive policies that could be adopted elsewhere. And of course, the fact that you are managed to be so many together, I mean, 12,000 active members of ZIMSOFF, that's quite impressive. And we all know that when we stand together, we stand stronger and we get to have a voice. We have reached the end of this session, and we don't have any more questions, although I'm sure we could all keep on picking your brain. I certainly could. Nelson, thank you so much. So much, and to all of you that are listening from all over the world, and those of you that will be listening afterwards, watching the recording. And Nelson and Elizabeth, we hope Elizabeth will have better internet connection on Sunday, because I just want to point out that on Sunday, both Nelson and Elizabeth are going to be with us online, and we're having this session called Co-Creating a Movement for the World We Want. And that's going to be also with other people from partners from this World Localization Day. So we're going to hear from people from all over the world that, like Nelson and Elizabeth, in each their way, are contributing to a global to local shift. And in a way to the independence that you're talking so much about, Nelson, because that's, I think, is what we all want, no? The right to be able to grow our own food, the right to be able to, and the ability to strengthen our local economies, and you know, to be healthy and happy, and to have well-being both for people and planet, no? So Nelson, can you come on again, because I'm feeling very lonely here on the screen by myself, just to say goodbye. And
yes,
Carly,
I will be available on Sunday.
Thank you. Well, thank you to all of you, and have a good afternoon, Nelson, and say goodbye to Elizabeth from us. It's been a pleasure and very informative. I've got lots of notes here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye from
Bye-bye. Thank you
Mexico.
very much.